In the year 1236, something happened in Delhi that had never happened anywhere in the Islamic world. A woman sat on the throne. Not as a regent. Not as a widow holding power for a son. As Sultan. As the sovereign ruler in her own name, by her own right, chosen by her father over all his sons because he believed she was the best of them. Her name was Razia al-Din. History would call her Razia Sultana. She would rule the Delhi Sultanate, one of the most powerful kingdoms in the medieval world, for 4 years. She would ride elephants into battle. She would hold court without a veil. She would command armies, negotiate treaties, and make decisions that men twice her age deferred to. And she would be destroyed not by an enemy army from outside, but by the men inside her own court who could not tolerate what she represented. This is the story of the only woman who ever ruled the Delhi Sultanate as Sultan in her own right. It is a story about power, about gender, about betrayal, and about what happens when a system built entirely by men produces a woman who is better at leading than any of them. To understand Razia, you must first understand her father. Shams-ud-Din Iltutmish was not born to rule. He was born a slave. Purchased as a boy, he rose through military service, married into the right family, proved himself in battle after battle, and eventually seized the Delhi throne in 1211. He was brilliant, calculating, and utterly unsentimental about power. And when he looked at his children, he saw only one who matched him. Iltutmish had sons. Several of them. He sent them to govern provinces and command armies. One by one they disappointed him, weak where they needed to be strong, impulsive where they needed to be patient. Razia was different. She sat in on councils, listened to her father conduct diplomacy and plan campaigns, and asked questions that cut to the heart of problems while her brothers were still trying to understand what the problem was. In 1231, 5 years before his death, Iltutmish formally designated Razia as his heir. The nobles protested. Of course they protested. This was unheard of. This violated custom, tradition, every expectation. Iltutmish listened to them all and then dismissed every objection with a single sentence recorded by chroniclers of the time. "My sons are devoted to the pleasures of youth. There is no one more worthy to succeed me than my daughter." He died in 1236. What happened next proved he was right, and wrong at the same time. Iltutmish died in April 1236. Despite his explicit designation of Razia, the nobles immediately placed her brother Ruknuddin Firoz on the throne instead. Custom overrode the dead sultan's written wishes. Ruknuddin was everything his father had warned against: dissolute, distracted, and entirely manageable. He handed real power to his mother Shah Turkan, who used it to settle personal scores, while Ruknuddin spent his days in pleasure, ignoring the actual business of governance entirely. The provinces began to fracture. Governors tested the center's weakness. Military commanders wondered where their loyalties should lie. The Delhi Sultanate, which Iltutmish had built into a regional power of genuine consequence, began to come apart within months of his death. Shah Turkan, sensing Razia as a threat, ordered her execution. The order was not carried out. But the message was clear: the court that had dismissed her father's wishes was now actively trying to eliminate her. Razia's response was remarkable. She appeared before the public at the Friday mosque, not through intermediaries, but in person, and spoke directly to the population of Delhi, reminding them of her father's designation and what the Sultanate was becoming. The people responded. There was an uprising. Ruknuddin was deposed after just 7 months. And Razia al-Din became Sultan of Delhi. From the first day of her reign, Razia made deliberate choices that announced exactly what kind of ruler she intended to be. She abandoned the veil in public, not a casual act but a statement of sovereignty. She adopted male dress in court. She held public durbar, receiving petitions and conducting business where she could be seen and questioned directly. She did not rule from behind a curtain or through male intermediaries. She was present, visible, and sovereign. She rode on horseback and elephant without the curtain that convention demanded for a woman in public. She reviewed military troops in person. She issued judgments in her own voice. Every one of these acts was a deliberate statement. She would govern as a sultan governed, without the modifications her gender was supposed to require. Her supporters celebrated it. The population of Delhi, who had backed her against Ruknuddin, saw in her the competence so visibly absent in her brother. Her opponents saw something different. A challenge to every assumption their world was built on. Petitioners who brought cases before her found that she listened, questioned, and decided with a clarity and efficiency that the court under Ruknuddin had entirely lacked. The machinery of the Sultanate, which had ground nearly to a halt, began functioning again. But in the medieval court of Delhi, competence was not enough to save her. And assumptions were defended with steel. The Delhi Sultanate was built on a structure of power known as the Khalgani, the 40 senior Turkic slave nobles who governed provinces, commanded armies, and administered the treasury. They were the real machinery of the Sultanate. Iltutmish had managed them carefully, keeping them powerful enough to feel invested but divided enough that no single faction could challenge the throne. Razia inherited this structure. And the 40 had a profound problem with her, not just because of her gender, but because she was competent enough to see through them. She understood that some of the 40 were running their provinces as personal fiefdoms. That revenues meant for Delhi were being skimmed. That their loyalty was conditional on the throne being weak enough that they could operate with impunity. A weak sultan served their interests perfectly. Ruknuddin had been ideal, dissolute, distracted, entirely manageable. Razia was none of these things. She sent inspectors. She asked questions about provincial accounts. She made appointments that bypassed their established networks of patronage. From their perspective, she was a problem that needed to be solved. The man who would become the face of their opposition was Malik Altunia, governor of the Punjab. But he was not the only threat. The 40 moved carefully, slowly, in the way of men who understood that patience in court politics was as important as speed on a battlefield. They were building something. And Razia, watching from Delhi, could see it happening and could not stop it without triggering the very rebellion she was trying to prevent. Among Razia's most trusted commanders was Malik Yakut, an Abyssinian, East African by origin, who had risen through military skill to become a Mirayakur, master of the horse, one of the highest military offices in the Sultanate. Razia elevated him further. The 40 were already looking for reasons to move against her. Yakut gave them a narrative, a sultan who had elevated an African outsider over Turkish nobles who considered themselves the natural ruling class. The chronicles describe a closeness between Razia and Yakut that her enemies used as a political weapon. Whether this was genuine personal intimacy or simply the working relationship between a sovereign and her most trusted officer, it became ammunition. The nobles could not openly say they opposed her because she was a woman, though they said that too. But a sultan who had elevated an Abyssinian outsider over Turkish nobles? That was a grievance they could rally support around. Razia understood the danger. But she faced the classic trap of the ruler trying to govern a system that does not want to be governed by them. The 40 controlled the provinces and the armies stationed in them. She could not move against them directly without triggering the very rebellion she was trying to prevent. And she could not appear weak by dismissing the people she trusted without feeding the perception that she was already failing. The trap was closing. She could see it and could not escape it. By 1239, the 40 had decided to move. The revolt erupted in multiple provinces simultaneously, coordinated, not spontaneous. Governors who had been quietly hostile for years now openly challenged the authority of Delhi. The message was clear. Razia's legitimacy was being denied not by a single powerful rival but by the collective refusal of the ruling class to accept her. Razia responded by doing what a sultan was supposed to do. She led her army into the field personally. She rode with her troops, commanding from the front. She suppressed several uprisings. Her military capability was real, not ceremonial. But the sheer number of simultaneous revolts meant that putting down one rebellion left others burning. The Sultanate was too large and the opposition too coordinated for any single campaign to solve the problem. The critical moment came in the Punjab, where Malik Altunia openly rebelled, and during the fighting, Yakut was killed. Razia marched north to face Altunia directly with an army already stretched thin by months of campaigning. She marched on Bathinda. Her commanders defected at the crucial moment, men who had said one thing and did another when the stakes became real. She was captured. Her army was gone. Her most trusted commander was dead. The woman who had ruled one of the most powerful kingdoms in Asia was now a prisoner of the rebel who had broken her campaign. And then she made the most extraordinary decision of her reign. She proposed marriage to Altunia. Let that sit for a moment. A reigning sultan, a woman who had ruled one of the most powerful kingdoms in Asia in her own right, proposing marriage to the rebel who had just defeated her in battle. It reads like surrender. It was not surrender. It was strategy. Razia was not surrendering her claim. She was acquiring an army. Altunia accepted. And this tells you everything about both of them. He was not ideologically opposed to Razia, he had revolted because he calculated her position was weakening and he needed to be on the winning side. By marrying her he was not destroying her. He was betting that her legitimacy combined with his military force could recover the throne. Together they turned south toward Delhi. Razia to reclaim what had been taken. Altunia because a queen sultan was a better prize than a captive one. It was the most unlikely alliance in the history of the Delhi Sultanate. The woman who had been captured and the man who had captured her, marching together to take back a throne that both of them needed. It should not have worked. History gives us very few cases where the right move is to marry your captor. Razia Sultana was making one of them. Whether it would be enough was about to be decided at the walls of Delhi. While Razia had been fighting in the Punjab, the 40 had moved with ruthless efficiency in Delhi. They had placed another brother, Wazuddin Bahram Shah, on the throne and consolidated control of the capital. When Razia and Altunia marched south, they were not marching toward an empty throne. They were marching toward a fully organized military opposition that had spent months preparing for exactly this confrontation. The battle was brief and catastrophic. Bahram Shah's forces were numerically superior. More critically, commanders who had indicated support for Razia's return defected at the crucial moment, not the first time she had been betrayed by men who said one thing and did another when stakes became real. Her army collapsed. In the chaos, Razia and Altunia were separated from their forces and fled with a small party of followers, trying to reach sanctuary. They did not find it. The end came near a village called Kaithal, in what is now the state of Haryana. The accounts differ, some say they were killed by local people who saw an opportunity, some say executed on Bahram Shah's orders. What is certain is that Razia Sultana, the only woman ever to reign as Sultan of Delhi, died on October 14, 1240. She was approximately 35 years old. She had ruled for 3 years, 6 months, and 6 days. The medieval chronicles that recorded Razia's reign were written by men within a worldview that had settled ideas about gender and power. Minhaj-i-Siraj Juzjani, the most important chronicler of the period, knew Razia personally. He served at her court. And his account is genuinely admiring. He calls her a great sovereign, a dispenser of justice, a generous benefactor, endowed with all the qualities befitting a king. And then, almost reluctantly, he adds that unfortunately she was not born of the right sex, and that was why her reign ultimately failed. This is not a neutral observation. It is the conclusion of a man trying to reconcile genuine admiration with the ideological framework his world provided for understanding gender and power. The framework won. Later chroniclers were less generous. The further in time from her actual reign, the easier it became to fit her story into conventional narratives about what happens when the natural order is violated. History did to Razia in the written record exactly what the 40 had done to her in the palace. It reduced her. What the chronicles cannot hide, because the facts are too consistent across too many sources, is the quality of her governance. The Sultanate functioned under her. It fractured without her. The men who replaced her presided over 25 years of instability that ended only when a ruler as strong as Razia finally emerged again. Iltutmish had been right. The proof of it was written in a quarter-century of chaos that followed her death. After Razia's death, the Delhi Sultanate went through a period of sustained instability that proved exactly what her father had foreseen. Bahram Shah lasted 4 years before being deposed and killed by the same nobles who had installed him. 3 more sultans followed in rapid succession over the next decade. Each was installed by noble factions, each deposed when those factions calculated that a different ruler would serve their interests better. The Sultanate that Iltutmish had built into a coherent power fractured into a system where the throne was a prize to be won and discarded. None of the sultans who followed Razia in that chaotic quarter-century matched her. Not in administrative ability, not in military competence, not in the quality of governance they provided to the millions living under the Sultanate. It was not until 1265, when Ghiyas-ud-Din Balban, himself a member of the original 40, seized the Sultanate and ruled it with iron discipline by systematically destroying the power of the 40, that stability returned. The institution that had brought down Razia eventually consumed itself. Balban achieved stability by doing what Razia had been trying to do, breaking the power of the nobles who believed they were above accountability. He succeeded where she had failed not because he was more capable but because he had something she did not. The court accepted his authority without the organized institutional resistance that had mobilized against her from her very first day on the throne. The difference between their reigns was not competence. It was gender. And the price of that difference was 25 years paid in blood and chaos by the people of the Sultanate. There is a grave in Old Delhi, in a crowded neighborhood called Bulbul-i Khana, the place of songbirds, that most visitors to the city never find. It sits in a small enclosure, modest and somewhat forgotten, surrounded by the dense urban fabric of one of the world's most crowded cities. Historians debate whether it truly marks Razia's burial site. But it has been venerated as hers for centuries, and people still come to it. The rulers who followed her built grand monuments to themselves. Iltutmish built the Qutb Minar complex. Balban built a tomb that still stands. Razia, who governed better than most of them, lies in a modest grave in a crowded alley. This too is part of her story. History is not always written by the winners. Sometimes it is written by the survivors. And the survivors in Razia's case were the men of the 40 who had preferred 25 years of chaos to a woman on the throne. Today her name is on schools, streets, and institutions across the Indian subcontinent. The men who destroyed her are mostly forgotten, remembered only as footnotes to her story. She is the one who lasted. Not in power, they took that from her. But in memory, which nobody could take, and which she has held for 7 centuries. The Sultan who was a woman. And the proof that the most dangerous thing in a medieval court was not a sword but a competent woman who refused to pretend she was anything less than what she was. Razia Sultana ruled the Delhi Sultanate for 3 years, 6 months, and 6 days. In that time she held court without a veil, commanded armies in person, administered a kingdom of millions, suppressed multiple provincial rebellions, and conducted the business of one of the most complex political entities in the medieval world with a competence that even her enemies acknowledged in their private accounts. She failed. But the answer to why she failed is not the one the chronicles want to give you. She did not fail because she was a woman and women cannot rule. She failed because the institution she governed had been designed, built, and staffed by men with enormous personal investments in a system that a strong, competent sultan would inevitably reform. The 40 did not bring down Razia because she was incompetent. They brought her down because she was competent enough to see them clearly, and to begin doing something about it. The revolt was not a response to her failure. It was a response to her success. What she proved, in 3.5 years against the most organized institutional opposition imaginable, was exactly what her father had always said. She was the best of his children. One of the most capable rulers the Delhi Sultanate ever produced. She governed well under conditions of extreme difficulty, with enemies inside her own court working against her every single day, in a system that had not been built to accommodate her and was actively trying to expel her. 7 centuries later, her name endures. The men who destroyed her are footnotes. She is the story.